yet again, I found myself in a position today where I was defending America. And like, why do I have to keep doing this? I don't know. But I think the argument comes up a lot. Whether or not America, the United States of America, has a culture. And I think if you had asked me in high school, not I think, I know for sure if you had asked me this in high school, I would have told you, no, America doesn't have a culture. Like, it's bullshit. It's a conglomeration of all of these different ethnicities who have come and lived in the country. Which is true, right? Obviously, like, to say that the American culture as it stands right now doesn't have any roots in all of the immigrant populations who have moved there, like, that would be a false statement to say that that's not there. That's obviously present, right? So I was talking to this guy earlier today, and he was like, "No, America doesn't have a culture. It just took things from the Germans, from the Italians, from the Jews, from everyone who came into the country, and like that's the culture." And I was like, "Okay, that is true, but this unique combination of immigrants all collectively coming together to create this new culture is unique to the United States of America in that sense." And yes, of course, there are other countries like France, for example, who have plenty of immigrant populations and they impact the culture in a unique way. So, for example, like everyone in France suddenly, like, Arabic terms are just part of the slang. Habibi, wesh, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's part of their slang now. That's a unique part of their culture now. So, the same thing can be said about the United States. So the specific communities of people who have all decided to migrate into this land, and also the people who have natively lived on this land, have formed to create a certain culture in the United States. And I understand that it's not an old country, right? In relation to a lot of other countries that exist, it's a new country. And so people seem to think that because there's no history, there's no culture, but I'm not even convinced that like culture necessarily needs history, though it often those often go hand in hand. But it's like, I mean, let's for example talk about a work culture, right? You can have a culture in a workplace that doesn't somehow prelude the fact, like, you know, you can have a culture in a workplace without the workplace being millennia old. So, what is culture? Then, in that sense, I Googled it. I found definitions. I wrote them down on a shitty piece of envelope. Culture, the first definition that comes up on Google, you can find this yourselves, is arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. And I'm glad that that was mentioned because this was actually the first thing that I thought of. When I think of culture, I usually think of arts, music, food, things of that nature, literally. Manifestations of human intellect, the way that they wrote it here. And the first example that I used to kind of like refute this today when I was talking about it was Hollywood. Like Hollywood, LA, like the whole movie industry that is the United States, and not just movies, but also music, right? That is American culture. And I was explaining, like, tell me where in the world y'all don't watch American movies. Tell me where in the world y'all don't listen to American music. Obviously, there's plenty of places, but I mean, when you come to Europe, a vast majority. And this guy even admitted, he was like, no, probably like more than half of the stuff we watch is American. Okay, so that's American content. It's not that other countries in the world aren't making other movies and no one cares. It's that there's something about American movies. Because that's part of the American culture. Is cinema, believe it or not. Is the music industry, believe it or not. It's very glamorous. Yes, that is a characteristic. That's an adjective to define this culture, right? Like, there is if I can use literal words to describe the culture, then the culture exists. That's an adjective that I can place on the arts and other manifestations of human intellect that has been regarded as a collective achievement of the United States. Using the definitions here. My water is starting to boil. I am making pasta. So if you can hear it in the background, I don't know, deal with it. So there's that. But there are other things that are like exclusively American that people, I think, kind of forget about, especially when you think of the school system, right? Okay, so yes, my brain jumped into school shootings. That is a thing. I wasn't actually thinking of that, but that is a thing. But let's talk about frats, like fraternity culture. Like that's so fucking American. That's so fucking stereotypically quintessentially American, is thinking about fraternity houses. And then whenever I like go to a different country and they're like, "Are frats like that real?" I'm like, "Bro, they're real. Like it is actually like that." Things like yellow school buses, right? Again, talking about education and school, like those are part of American culture. In the same way that the um like telephone booths, the red telephone booths in London, England are like visually representative of the culture, I think that yellow school buses are also visually representative of American culture. Right? Cool. So there are things. And then, okay, we also talk about food and stuff, and there are things that are like just so fucking American. Fried food, so fucking American. Not all of it, obviously, there's other countries that make fried food, but you get the point that I'm making. Like fast food culture, Starbucks, just because it's large corporations and just because it doesn't have a large amount of history doesn't mean that it's not part of the culture. This fast paced moving shit, this corporate capitalist shit. The American dream, I've talked about this before. That's part of the culture. Part of the myth of America, part of the culture of America is this idea of manifest destiny. Let's talk about the Dust Bowl. Let's talk about the Great Depression. Let's talk about people looking for work. Like, capitalism, that is a culture. If you, doesn't matter if you don't fucking like it, it's still a culture. I'm really going against everything that I would have said back in high school. Maybe that one guy who fought me, I remember in high school when I said, I was like, no, America doesn't hold a culture, like, that's bullshit. And he was like, no, it does. And he was right, actually. So, he was right. I should probably message him and be like, just so you know, I changed my mind. Um, okay. Then I want to talk about the regional stuff. Just like any other country with any other culture, different regions have different cultures and specialities. So, like, example, West Coast, right? We think about Hollywood, we think about all that stuff. When you think about the rural South in the United States, they have their own culture, they have their own dances, they have their own food, they have their own slang. In the same way that Southern Germany is different from Northern Germany, Southern United States is different from Northern United States. I think that that's just like, you can see there's cultural differences in the way people dress, in the way they speak. Does that suddenly mean that there's not a unified American culture? No, there is still a unified culture. It's just there's subcategories because there's different regions. The East Coast is known for something else than the West Coast, and vice versa. The Midwest is known for its own things. And there's obviously cultures because we can clearly identify, like I can clearly say that the East Coast is more like this than the West Coast. So if I can spot a difference, that means there's something there. Again, if I can put adjectives to it, it exists. Okay. Then let's talk about the second definition that popped up because it's going to bring me to my, I think, last point. The second definition was ideas, customs, social behavior of a particular group of people. I want to focus on the social behavior part. All right. Social behavior. Whenever Americans are in a foreign land, what do people say? Americans are obnoxious. Americans are loud. They literally speak at the highest fucking volume. Americans this, Americans that. You can spot an American 1,000 miles away. So then Americans share a same social behavior. That is part of their culture. You don't have to like it. You don't have to like their Americans are obnoxious and loud. You don't have to see it that way. Americans might not view it that way. Americans might just view it as, oh, well, we're just really outgoing and friendly. That's how they'll view it. You know? But that is a particular social behavior. That's the whole thing about stereotypes. If you can stereotype a whole group of people like that, then they have a shared culture. There's something that you think connects all of them, and that is the American culture, right? Great. That is without me going into the political stuff all too much. I'm just going to leave it at that. This actually is a short video. I gotta make my pasta and I gotta go. So yeah, I mean, okay. Is the culture and the history of the United States very long? No, but it has been a couple hundred years now. There are things that are unique to the United States that have formed a certain mindset, that have formed certain customs and ideas and innovation and social behaviors that are characteristic of Americans. And Americans might look different, and yes, in different regions they might act differently and they might speak differently and they might have taken a lot of things from a lot of different cultures, but to say that the way that Americans act is the exact same as anywhere else in the world is wrong, right? I hate having to keep defending this shit, but y'all just want to keep pushing my buttons.